Good afternoon, hello, or good morning. Thank you all for coming. I'm Christy Yeoman. I'm the Executive Director here at Winter Garden Heritage Foundation. We're so excited to have Nicole and our guests with Oakland Nature Preserve. I hope everyone has signed in today. Everybody sign in. We are so excited. This kicks off our first Lunch and Learn of the year. So we'll be having these every month, and then we have our quarterly Heritage Happy Hours as we have each exhibit that is a new exhibit. We have our quarterly Heritage Happy Hours. So if you're not on our mailing list, make sure you put your email so you can find out about our events and our Lunch and Learns and all of the things that are going on. If you're not a member, we would love for you all to be a member, and you can scan and become a member. Membership helps us to be able to provide free lunches and do all of the events that we do for free, as well as keep the museums open for free. So please support us so we can support our neighbors. And we love this. So there's lunch, grab your lunch, and again, thank you so much for coming. If there's anybody that plays pickleball in here, February 28th, pickleball tournament. So anyway, so I'll let Nicole take it away.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm here today to talk with you guys about Oakland Nature Preserve and the cool things that we're doing over there. We cannot talk about Oakland Nature Preserve, though, if we don't talk about Lake Apopka history, because Oakland Nature Preserve would not be here without the history of what happened with Lake Apopka. So I took some pieces from a presentation that I did a couple of months ago and put it on here, Lake Apopka, A Story of Resilience. And then at the end, I tacked in some information, more information about Oakland Nature Preserve as well. So it's kind of a mesh of some presentations. I do have a couple of things that I'm going to pass around as well throughout the morning. Please feel free, interrupt me, raise your hand if you have any questions. I want this to be a conversation. And then at the end, we can also chat a little bit more too. So we'll just get started by talking about the early history of Lake Apopka. So it's been documented, Aboriginal use around the lake has been documented since about 10,000 BC. So there is a quite long history of the Native Americans utilizing the Lake Apopka region, particularly around the north side of the lake. And they used it pretty consistently until about 400 AD, and then it was a little bit more sporadic until about 1500 AD when the Spanish started colonizing the area. When the Spanish came through, they called the natives that kind of ranged down the St. Johns River towards Apopka the Timucua. The name Lake Apopka, the name Apopka was Ahapopka, and it's thought to have meant a couple of different things. It could either have meant trout eating place, so great place for fishing, or potato. So there's a couple of thoughts as to what exactly it meant. The natives would have utilized the lake for just about all daily living needs. So they would have foraged around it. They would have fished in it. It would have been great, searching for places for cover and whatnot all around the lake. So it's been documented, and I'm going to pass these around real quick. So I would love for you guys to take a look here. There's a lot of different documented archaeological sites where things have been dug up. What I'm passing around right now are some pottery sherds that were actually found on Oakland Nature Preserve property just 4 years ago by some volunteers from the Winter Garden Rotary Club that were helping us out by doing some digging and planting. So that's pieces of pottery sherds. And in talking with some archaeologists, they estimate that they're from the range of 750 AD to 1500 AD, so kind of that later years of the natives living in the area. At the time that the natives were here, and actually let me go back one slide real quick. On this map that's down at the bottom, it kind of shows what Lake Apopka looked like prior to Europeans starting to settle in the area. It was a lot larger, especially up at the top. It was the second largest lake in Florida. And then, okay, so we've got a range of different artifacts and canoe recoveries that have been found all around the lake, as well as some burial mounds as well. And First settlers started coming in, moving in around the lake, started realizing that the lake provided really great weather tempering. So as cold winds would blow across the lake, the warmer water would heat those winds up. So it was great to start planting all around the lake because it helped warm that air to make sure it didn't freeze out some of those crops. So the settlers started settling around the lake, planting crops, a variety of different things. And at first, there was not a great way to transport those crops that they were starting to grow. So they would float them across the river, kind of to the east side, and then they would take them by wagon to a couple of different areas, one on the Wekiva River, and then another one up on kind of Sanford area. That was not a great way to get things accomplished because it would take way too long for them to do those. So some people, particularly some of the settlers in the area, they decided to go ahead and try to use some steamships to help make that go a little bit faster. So they would steam things across from the west side of the lake to the east side, and then also steamships were used on the various rivers to get things up to Jacksonville and the areas to the north as well. The settlers in the region were pretty self-sufficient at that time. They made a little bit of cash from their crops, but it wasn't huge at that time. But they started, of course, the orange groves started being planted, and especially on the south side of the lake. The north side of the lake was still pretty much left alone at that point in the 1800s. There wasn't a ton going on up there yet. So more about the settlers. So they started growing their own crops, started more and more being able to ship them out. But by ox team, it would still take a really long time to get the crops from one area to another. And around that time, steamships were being developed, and two people went ahead and said, hey, we need to build a canal to connect Lake Apopka to the waters to the north to make this go a lot faster. So they started developing plans for the Apopka-Beauclair Canal. As that was going on, though, there was also railroad being brought into town. So the railroad tracks that were, our rails to trail system right out here in front of us started being laid down. So by the time they actually really got the steamships and the canal going, the railroad was already here. So there wasn't a huge use for the canal once it finally opened up. Let's see, there's some picture of the canal right there. So you can see the goal was to connect it from the north side of Lake Apopka up to the Harris Chain of Lakes to be able to then connect to the Ocklawaha River to get to the St. Johns River. The canal is still functional, yes. So you can navigate the canal. And in fact, an interesting thing, it's got locks on it to be able to control the water levels. And manatees can actually get through the lock system and down into Lake Apopka. So, yes. We actually had, not this past winter, but the winter before, we had 6 manatees that we spotted at the dock at Oakland Nature Preserve. So, yeah. The two people I did forget to mention, the Apopka Canal Company was run by Bluford Sims and Judge Spear. So they are two of the prominent people that were living and working in this area at that time. I believe they're controlled by the Water Management District, but I could be wrong about that.
You usually put the boat in it in Winter Garden and go all the way to St. Johns River.
Yes.
Just walk through there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
my understanding is somebody mans it until, I believe, either 5 or 7 o'clock at night. So you can only go
During the
through
daylight hours.
Exactly, it's daylight.
It's gone to dusk.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. Okay, so around that time, people were still doing a lot of fishing in the area. Lake Apopka was well known for its sports fishing. People were catching a lot of bass and a lot of big bass, as well as some other sports fish as well, some warmouth and other sunfish, bluegills. So boomtown for Winter Garden for the town of Oakland. All the little towns starting to really crop up around the area. People would come to fish. And we got another little kind of a advertisement that was in Sportsman's Paradise. I guess maybe a magazine or something like that, that just kind of really shows. I believe these are photos of like Newton Park area. So it's kind of fun. And such great fishing that there were a lot of fish camps that cropped up around the lake. So fish camps were little businesses where people could come and get outfitted for fishing, rent boats, sleep over in cabins, and there were camps dotted all around the circumference of the lake. And they had little cabins that fishermen could stay in or rent gear from. A lot of those cabins have just been taken down over time. However, there are a couple of remaining cabins left, including this one here that is on the property of Oakland Nature Preserve. It was moved from Tom's Fish Camp, which is on the west side in Montverde. And so we moved it onto our property to be able to preserve it. And I think there's one more cabin that's left from that fish camp as well that's on a private property in Montverde right now too. It is our goal to be able to eventually restore this fish cabin to be able to be a kind of a display of what life would have been like at those times in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But as of right now, it is used as storage for us. But you can come and take a look around the outside of it. And just a few more pictures of the big bass. You can see that one is almost as big as that kiddo that's sitting there. So obviously very well utilized for bass fishing. And fishing kept going on through at least the 1950s, 1960s. But by the 1940s, we started utilizing the north sides of the lake, especially during World War II. So we needed food production during the war. And they realized that the north side of the lake had this really fertile, rich soil that was just covered in a few inches of water, this nice mucky type of soil. So they said, hey, let's go ahead and drain that and we can farm that area. So when they started doing that, between the digging of the canal and the draining of the farms on the north side, they took the lake from the second largest to the fourth largest. So they did shrink the size of the lake. When they started doing that. It was needed at the time. We needed an area to be able to grow these vegetables, to support the war effort and to support families here at home. So you can see in my top picture, 1939, really before the farms started getting going. These photos that we have here, there's a lot of submerged vegetation within the lake, and there's no canals or levees or anything that's separating off the land portion. But then by 1947, you can start seeing that there are different plots of land that are being used for farming. So they've got levees, and then they also have a pump station that they're pumping water in and out of these different plots of land. The reason that they would flood water in and out of them is because during the summertime, when it's so hot and stagnant, that water loses its oxygen, and then it's not great for growing. So they flood new water in, it kind of mixes up a little bit, and then they push the water back out to the lake. As they were doing that, they were pushing a lot of excess nutrients into the lake, particularly phosphorus, but other things as well. So a couple of pictures of kind of what the development around the north side of the lake looked like. So 1941, it was pretty much marshy. So a little bit of water on the ground, a couple inches for miles and miles. 1947, we had started dividing it off for the farms. 1953, a lot more farms and a lot less marshy area. And then by 1985, there was no marsh left on the north side of the lake. It was all farms. So what happens when all of those nutrients get into a body of water? It's what we call eutrophication. So most bodies of water are in some sort of good stasis where they have enough light coming down, the plants can produce oxygen, and when you get excess nutrients in the water, the algae are like, yeah, this is great, I love this. they explode. If we get a lot of algae growing in the water, the light cannot penetrate down. And if the light can't get down, the plants that are on the bottom, they can't photosynthesize. If they can't photosynthesize, they don't produce oxygen, which is needed by our fish and other animals that live in the water column itself. So gradually over time, you're losing that submerged aquatic vegetation and oxygen levels decrease. And it just is a vicious cycle where the algae are still loving it because there's still plenty of nutrients coming in and less and less and less fish. So this is just a couple of photos. So when you've got less phosphorus, that's the P up there, you've got some nice green grasses that are growing, a variety of plants. When you get more phosphorus, you get an algae-covered lake. And this picture is just amazing. 1995, a boat cutting across Lake Apopka, and it's just cutting a knife right into that algae. I've got another picture right over here that is a satellite image from 1992 of the south part of Florida. Lake Apopka was called the Emerald Badge of Shame. So you can see the lake is just a bright tealish green color compared to all of the other lakes that we've got in Florida.
How much did the lake drop the canal in that?
I don't remember the exact amount, but it was a couple of feet in some areas. Yeah, it wasn't like a huge. Lake Apopka in general is a shallow lake. Our deepest parts of the lake are only at 15 to 18 feet deep, and there's only a couple of areas that are that deep. So overall, it's pretty shallow. But I don't remember the exact numbers of how much it dropped. So, as I mentioned, we were losing the fish. By the 1970s, there weren't much fish left in the lake. Fish that were around were dying off quite frequently. We started having a lot of fish kills in the 1980s. So people started realizing there's a problem going on with this lake. We really need to do stuff to fix this. So a couple of different things happened. Some early restoration efforts started, but there wasn't really a lot of funding that was set aside for it. There was an act, or a water management district was established in 1972, not just because of Lake Apopka, but just in general. That's when they were establishing our water management districts. And our water management districts are really charged with ensuring that we have a plentiful, clean, freshwater supply of groundwater, or surface water, sorry. So they were established, and eventually they were charged with, you need to fix what's going on with the lake. But before that started really happening, there was a Lake Apopka Restoration Act, which really started pushing that, hey, we know we need to take care of this. We need to find some funding sources to figure out what to do with the lake. So by the late 1980s, they had started doing some pilot projects of how can we do this? So the scientists were really getting together, trying to do different experiments and really brainstorming ways that we could correct some of the issues that were going on with the lake. It was named as a priority for restoration, and at that point, the St. Johns River Water Management District really took charge of the restoration. There was a Water Improvement Act that was passed in 1987. And then in 1989, the management district started kind of really exploring what they call the marsh flowway. And the marsh flowway is their main modality of cleaning up the water. And I'll get into that in just a second. By 1991, a group of people got together, and they called themselves the Friends of Lake Apopka, FOLA. And they really were the advocates for telling the state, there's a real problem. You really need to focus on this. We've got to dedicate some money to this. So they went ahead and they bottled up some water from the lake, and they called it Fola Cola. So a cute, catchy little name. And you can just see how dirty and gross that water was. They even created a label for it, and they took it up to Tallahassee.
That's actually.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so they got started in 1991, and then several years later, they said, okay, we're getting the state to work on the problem with the lake, but we need to ensure that there's continuing education about this. And that's when they decided to go ahead and set up a separate nonprofit and called it the Oakland Nature Preserve. And so that is our origin story. So the whole history of Lake Apopka is tied into why Oakland Nature Preserve is here. We are charged with educating the public about the Lake Apopka ecosystem and natural Florida in general, and then for restoring and conserving the land that we are on. So, going back a little bit to the St. Johns River Water Management District and what they're doing to help clean up the lake. This is kind of the general flow of what you need to do to stop this eutrophication. So first, you have to stop the phosphorus from going into the water. They did that by buying up all of the farms on the north side of the lake. Then you've got to figure out how to lower the phosphorus concentrations. That will then reduce gradually your levels of algae. That will allow the bottom-rooted plants to start thriving. You may have to plant some new bottom-rooted plants, and they did. It allows the sunlight to reach down to allow those plants to then thrive. And then eventually your game fish can return, especially if you help restock the lake, which they did as well. I will go through over to this one over here. So they had a couple of methods for how they were going to go ahead and do this actual cleaning up of the lake. So I mentioned that they bought the farms that stopped the phosphorus from being washed into the lake on a routine basis. The next thing that they did was they created a marsh flowway. So what that means is over here, I know it's a little hard to see and you guys can come up after the lunch to take a look at it, but on the west side of the lake, they have different cells, different areas of land. And what they're doing is they are allowing water to flow into those marshy areas and then directing the water through different areas that are planted with marshy grasses. And as the water is flowing through it, the grasses slow the water down. When the water is slowed down, the particulate matter that's inside of it drops to the bottom. And so then you're getting cleaner water that's washing back out into the lake. So that's the marsh flowway. It officially opened, they did testing of it in 1989, but the full scale of it didn't open until 2003. Yeah, so it did take them quite a while for them to get that going. But since then, it's been going very well. Other things that they did, of course, planting new aquatic vegetation once the water started clearing up a little bit. And then they also did something that's called gizzard shad removal. So there's a type of fish that's called a gizzard shad. It is a bottom-dwelling fish that kind of stirs up the muck a lot, so it increases that turbidity, the inability to see down into the water. And it also kind of hoards a lot of nutrients within its body. And they figured, hey, if we can remove a lot of this fish, because if a fish has all the nutrients in its body, when it dies, what's going to happen? Those nutrients are going to go back out into the environment again. So they said, okay, these fish are getting a lot of these nutrients, and they're not really a great fish to eat or do a lot with. So let's just get them out of there, remove the total amount of phosphorus that's in this ecosystem. So there were a lot of contractors that were paid to just fish these fish out of the Lake Apopka waters.
What did they fish for then?
I actually don't remember. I'm going to have to look that up. Could be, yeah. Yeah, okay. Very good.
Who's funding all this? State of Florida?
State of Florida, yes. So there was money that was set aside by the state. And so that's our St. Johns Water Management District. They're a state agency. Yep.
Are they still doing that?
They are, yes, absolutely. As far as the gizzard shad goes, I don't think they've been doing any active gizzard shad removal in quite a while. I'll have to ask my contact, but I think it's been a few years since they did a larger scale removal of it. Yeah.
It's interesting. We used to live on Little Wassail, and we would clean, like, not the good weeds, but the bad weed, the muck and good.
Yes.
We'd use it for fertilizer, and it was unbelievable fertilizer.
Right, because of all of that phosphorus in it.
Yeah.
Yep,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
it's for-
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you know the dollar amount that actually came through the budget for Lake Apopka this past session?
Ooh, no, I don't. Yeah.
The only reason I'm at, I used to be a legislative aide.
Okay.
I used to help do the budget in the Senate, and I know that they've been really, Central Florida has really suffered in water projects, particularly West Orange County.
Right.
And I was just wondering how much money they actually asked for.
In this most recent session?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't have that number, but I have been talking with, I'm on the board of the Friends of Lake Apopka. I'm newly on the board with them as well. So I'm just kind of learning about what they're doing. But the big project that is currently being talked about and asked for money, is that over the years, with all of this dead material falling down into the water column, all the plants dying, all the fish dying, it's just a very mucky, thick areas of muck in various different parts of the lake, particularly around the Newton Park boat ramp and the Magnolia Park boat ramp. So one of the big projects that FOLA is championing along with the City of Winter Garden is to go ahead and dredge out some of that excess muck. And I know that they've been requesting money for that. So, yeah. Yeah. So Friends of Lake Apopka and Oakland Nature Preserve, we continue to work together. Friends of Lake Apopka is more of the advocacy and ensuring that the different state agencies and organizations are all working together for the betterment of the lake. And then Oakland Nature Preserve is really here to educate people about what's going on and just about our natural environment in general. So recreation around Lake Apopka. One of the goals of the Friends of Lake Apopka was also to kind of showcase that we can go back to being an ecotourist destination. So, back in the heyday of the early 1900s, people were here for fishing. That's ecotourism. While we may not be a hotspot for fishing again, right now, it could be in the future, but there's also other ecotourism activities that we can do around the area. So starting from kind of this south portion, we've got the West Orange Trail, which is part of the Florida Coast to Coast Trail that will maybe one day be established, where you could literally bike from one coast to the other. We've got the Green Mountain Scenic Byway. A lot of areas around the lake are designated as part of the Great Florida Birding and Wildlife Trail. There's Magnolia Park, which is an Orange County park. There's the Lake Apopka Loop Trail, which is going to be opened up on February 28th. So there's a big event being planned. The FOLA 40, it's a 40 to 45 mile bike ride that's going to go completely around the lake. This will be their 9th annual one, where they're celebrating the completion of the loop around the lake. The Lake Apopka Wildlife Drive, that opened up in, I think, 2015, and that is on the St. John's Water Management District land on the north side of the lake. So that area, we call it the Lake Apopka North Shore, and it is basically all of those old farms. They've been trying to just reflood them and get them reestablished as marshland again. There are still a lot of old levees out there, but they are kind of working the different marsh areas to ensure that there's a great variety of habitats so that we're attracting the wildlife back. The Lake Apopka North Shore is known as a birding hotspot. It has been I think more bird species there than over on Merritt Island, which is also known as a hot birding hotspot. And almost as many species of birds are being seen up there as what you see in the Everglades. So we are attracting a lot of great things. There are several different ways, and I don't know how much it's changed since it was initially opened, but it's a possibility that they've added. So basically, it's a one-way drive. So you enter at an area called Lust Road, and then it's a 10 mile an hour on top of the levees. If you haven't been, it's a pretty amazing drive to go do. See lots of different wildlife, all different birds, alligators, otters, bobcats, snakes, everything, turtles. And then coming around the west side of the lake, there's Ferndale Preserve, which is a lake county. There's also the Green Mountain Scenic Overlook on that side as well. And then kind of down at the very bottom, we've got Oakland Nature Preserve. So before I move on to kind of more of what Oakland Nature Preserve does, do you guys have any more questions or want to discuss Lake Apopka anymore? Yeah.
When they start like getting more farm plants because they need it, and it became polluted, then the main goal was to clean the lake again.
Yes.
Are there still there any farms?
No, there are no major farms that are surrounding the lake anymore. There's a few that are offset by a little bit of a distance, but there's nothing left right on the lake.
Is that we needed to have again more lands to farm local, thinking about being local.
Right.
Is there like a system that could be sustainable for not to pollute the lake again?
That's a great question, and I don't know all of the farming practices these days, but I am sure that there are better farming practices that either uses different types of fertilizers or, we've learned that they can't flood those areas and then wash the water back into the lake. That was really what did it. What caused the most issues was that not just that the farms were there and rain was washing off fertilizers, it was that they flooded the farms and then pushed that water back out into the lake. So I don't know if there's any specific processes or mechanisms, but I would hope that we've made advances.
Permaculture farm in the environment,
Yeah.
and they use a species, and I don't know if that is possible because that it would be ideal for the environment.
Right.
To produce local, to consume local, not to bring in from other parts, and because this is a very fertile
Right.
soil
Yep.
where you can.
Absolutely. Yep.
Do they have an idea of when the lake will be not completely clean, but majorly?
Yeah. So, they actually met their initial goals in 2022. So we met it's basically the parts per billion. So the amount of phosphorus within the lake, they met that goal in 2022. So the major goal now is to ensure that we don't creep that back up so that we keep that phosphorus out of the water. We don't allow sources to let it back in, as well as, reducing the amount of muck that's in the lake. And that's going to help us really increase our visibility down into the lake and reduce that turbidity. I don't know. I haven't really asked anyone what they think their projections are for how long that's going to take. But it always takes a long time to fix something that you break when it comes to the ecosystems. But fish are thriving out there. The submerged aquatic vegetation that they have planted has been thriving and expanding. So it's all good news all around for sure.
So you don't know when they're planning on doing it back up?
There's a plan to work on it very soon. They're in the phase of putting out requests for proposals. So it is hopefully pretty imminent. Yeah. Yes.
Have you had any problems on Lake Apopka? There's a weed that has infected the butler chain.
Okay.
And it's just, it reproduces so fast.
Is it hydrilla?
No, it's not hydrilla.
Oh, okay.
It's a different weed.
Right.
And I was just wondering if Lake Apopka has been affected.
Not that I know of, but we do have an issue with hydrilla. So hydrilla grows inches a day, and it comes in through people not washing pieces off their boats from other lakes. And the concern is that it will grow so fast and overtake the areas that the submerged aquatic vegetation, again, won't be able to reach that light. So there are different efforts that have gone on around it. You can try to pull it up manually, but any little pieces that are left in the water are just going to keep expanding. So that doesn't really control it very well. Fish and Wildlife, FWC, has done spraying for it. The problems that come up with that is that once you spray herbicides on something and kill it, it then contributes to the muck that's on the ground or settled on the bottom. So we haven't really found it a great way to deal with that yet. It's a grass. Okay, I haven't heard about that one.
It's spread by seeds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A real nightmare.
Yeah.
Is that the high grass, the high stocky grass that we see when you on the boardwalk that's overgrowing everything?
No, that's our native grass out there. It's a bulrush. but she's talking about something else, and I haven't heard of it. So I'd be interested to know the name of it if you could figure it out, remember it. Yeah, very good.
How does the preserve come about? Like, is that the park or?
Yeah, so now we're going to get into the Oakland Nature Preserve. So we'll kind of step away from the history of Lake Apopka for a minute and go into Oakland Nature Preserve. So Friends of Lake Apopka established Oakland Nature Preserve as a separate entity in cooperation with the town of Oakland. So in order to get some land to be able to set aside as conservation land, they needed kind of a fiscal sponsor. And so the land via several different grants and trusts. So a lot of our land was purchased by the Florida Communities Trust Fund. But in order to do that, the town of Oakland needed to be kind of the designee for it. So the town owns the land that Oakland Nature Preserve is on. However, Oakland Nature Preserve Incorporated manages the land and the education part of it as a nonprofit. So we've got a really great cooperation going on with the town of Oakland. So initially, we started buying the land in 1999, and that initial purchase was, I think, like 95 acres or something. And then gradually in 2001, we got a few more acres added, 2003, a few more, and those were all purchased under conservation dollars. So those lands are permanently set aside as under conservation easements. Then in 2017, 18-ish, we got a few extra acres that we added on the west side of our property from what used to be called Hull Island. It's currently the Hull Island neighborhood. So we're sitting right now at about 150 acres. And like I said, the majority of our land is under conservation easements. So what that means is that we have to manage the land appropriately. We have to have a land management plan from the Florida Forest Service so that we ensure that we are managing for invasive species. So that's plants that naturally would not grow there. And also it restricts what we can put on that land. So really the only big structures that we have at the preserve is our education center and then our boardwalk, which goes about 2/3 of a mile out to Lake Apopka. 2/3 of our entire property. Let's see if I'll go back a little bit. Okay, so 2/3 of the entire property. The property is outlined in the black, and you can see most of that is forested wetland area. The only dry, really truly dry areas are what's encircled by the red trail that's over there, and then this area that's got the intricate trail system down at the bottom. So those are really our usable portions of the preserve land that we can recreate on, essentially. So because most of the property is wetlands, we're letting the wetlands do their thing. Trees grow in, trees get knocked down because of hurricanes, new trees grow up, natural cycles going on through there. The drier upland areas were previously agricultural, so they were part of the citrus farming industry. And then after the citrus freezes in the 80s, it was used by pine plantation owners, so people who would plant pine trees for the paper and pulp industry. So because of those uses of the land, there was a lot of not native stuff that was on the land when we got it. So we are doing active habitat restoration across approximately 20 acres of the property. And that includes this 10 to 11 acre plot that's surrounded by the red lines, the red trail out there. We actually, when we got that piece of land, it still had the pine trees on it in their rows, you know, like you see when you're driving down the highway, you see rows of pine trees. So we were able to go ahead and log those and then use the money from that to then be able to start restoring that land out there. Wrong way. The portion that's up closer to our education center and our driveway and parking area, it's in different phases of restoration. So the red trail is kind of one thing by itself, and then this other area is broken up into several different plots of land. And that was basically just, as we got the grants and the funding, we're like, okay, we're gonna tackle this one area. So what we would do is we would go in, hand pulling a ton of invasive plants, prepping the ground, planting the new plants that should be growing here, which in this area is going to be longleaf pine trees, wiregrass, other grasses that would naturally grow kind of associated with those, and then herbaceous flowering plants too. So it would be what we call a longleaf pine sandhill ecosystem. And so that's kind of what we are transitioning this land back to. So you can see up there, I know it might be a little bit far for some of you to read, but the different sections are labeled with numbers. And as we would restore an area, we then burn them. Now, why do we burn? We love fire. So fire is a natural process. Here in Florida, at the beginning of summer, it's been dry, dry, dry all winter. And then those summer thunderstorms come. Lightning strikes, and millions of acres of Florida would burn every single year. So our plants adapted to that over the millennia. And so we have plants now that won't produce their seeds unless they're heated by fire. So wiregrass, it will produce its inflorescent seeds once it's been burned. Longleaf pine trees, their bark is kind of fire resistant. So fire can't get deep inside of the tree to kill the tree off. And its cones won't open to disperse its seeds unless it's been heated. So when we stop natural fires from occurring, we're stopping those natural processes from occurring, and then we're doing further damage to these ecosystems. So because of that, we love fire at the preserve. We're on a roughly 3-year schedule for burning the different portions of our land. This upcoming spring, we're going to be burning the Red Trail portion, so that 10 to 11 acre plot out there. It's really interesting seeing the burns. They're managed by what we call a burn boss. So that is a wildland firefighter who is very well trained in controlling fires, and they do it under very strict environmental conditions. So, we kind of say, we give them a time frame and say, we want to burn in the month of April. And then he calls us up and he says, okay, it looks like next week could be good weather. And then he's like, I'll let you know 2 days ahead of time. So we get like a 2-day warning when this burn is actually going to happen. But then he brings a crew of people and equipment, and we set fire, we put out fire. And our boardwalk. So our boardwalk is probably our most popular trail. I would venture that 75% of the visitors to the preserve only go to the boardwalk, which I think is a little sad because we've got great natural trails otherwise. But the boardwalk is there's a lot of pictures of stuff on the boardwalk, and it's what people hear about. People see it on the map. It's the one nice long trail, and it's also ADA accessible. It is our only truly accessible trail. It was built in 2002, and I don't remember the cost of what it was built for. I did know that at one point. We had it redecked in 2020. The original boards were starting to fail, and we were having a volunteer go out there every single week and replace board by board by board, which was just not sustainable for how much work they were having to do. So we thankfully got a grant to be able to redeck it in that composite type of decking, so it should last quite a long time more. And our education center. So our education center was built in 2008, and we have in it a classroom that generally can seat about 24 people comfortably. We have a museum that is open to the public. Museum is open when we've got staff on site, or we do have some trusted volunteers that we call our senior docents or lead docents that open up the museum when staff can't be there. We are a very small staff. There are 2 of us that are full-time and 5 very part-time staff as well. Otherwise, in our education center, we've got the porch that's got rocking chairs and picnic tables. It's called the Serenity Porch because it's just beautiful and serene to sit out there and overlook the landscape. We've got the restrooms there as well. And then what occurs at the preserve? So we are open free of charge every day of the year from sunrise to sunset. Thankfully, we've got a great police department that open and close our gates for us so that we don't have to be there as staff members that whole time. So that allows us to be able to stay open to that sunset hours and open early in the morning. We estimate that we get about 30,000 visitors annually. We log minimum 6,000 hours of volunteering work at the preserve every single year. And that's been for the past 6 or 7 years. I have been with the preserve for 7 years. And I think about 7 years ago, we were just under 6,000, and it's just crept up and up and up. We have a really amazing crew of volunteers that do a variety of things. So we have volunteers that are doing the active habitat restoration. So they're out there pulling weeds every week, planting the plants. And then we have volunteers that are docents in our museum. We have volunteers that assist with our summer camps and other activities. We have volunteers who do maintenance projects. We don't have maintenance staff, and we're a property of 150 acres. There's a lot of maintenance that has to occur. I've had to learn a lot over the past 7 years. But thankfully, we've got some great mechanically oriented volunteers that have been helping us to ensure that we keep the property open and safe for everybody. And then we love our scouts too. So, Scouts BSA really has a thing about doing things to help their communities, especially once you get to the upper levels of it and they have to do projects. So there's been a lot of different things put into the preserve from Eagle Scouts or scouts that are completing their Eagle project. We've got a plaque up at our entrance that's off the West Orange Trail that lists every single Eagle project. And I mean, there are probably 50 or so projects. So there's been a lot. And we had just this past year, 9 projects that went to completion. So there's been an increase, I would say, in scouts completing their projects with us. And it's oftentimes building things. So they'll build us some benches or build us a little sign pavilion that we could put an interpretive sign into. It's installing fences. It's planting plants. It's helping us with some erosion control problems that we were having around the building. So wide variety. So what do we do besides just being there for people to explore? So we've got the 3.5 to 4 miles worth of trails that you can come explore anytime you want during our opening hours. But what else do we do? So with our education center, we have a very active education program. We host field trips for school-age children. We do preschool story times. We do summer camps. We have a homeschool class series. And then we do like family-friendly programming, typically on the weekends, that we call our Science Saturdays. So an example that we had last year was about habitats. And when we're talking about habitats, we also built fairy houses at the same time. So it was like a crafting kind of morning as well. We have our kayak tours that we call our blue hikes. Now, we don't launch from the preserve itself because we are not going to cart our kayaks 2/3 of a mile down the boardwalk to get to the lake. So we trailer our kayaks and meet in different locations around Central Florida. So we'll sometimes put in Montverde. Other times we'll put in Magnolia Park. Sometimes we'll go to the canal, that Apopka Beauclair Canal, and put in over at there's a boat ramp on that north side up there. And then we'll also do other bodies of water. So we've done some stuff over in Claremont, up more in like Eustis area. Just last month we went to Lake Eustis. So we do a lot of different things. A lot of fun. Yeah. Yes.
There are a lot of alligators. Are we fearful for kayaking in that lake?
Not in general, no. The alligators are going to be scared as we're making noise as we're going through the water. It's really your comfort level being out. I mean, I would say it's never a good idea to go out by yourself in general, but, it's always better to have a buddy with you. I don't know.
Is there any, I know the kayaking, of course, is to keep, from all the waves and all that versus a bigger vessel.
Yeah.
If you went a little larger and you monetize it, is there anything that could go on the water? Where you can monetize it and make money?
I mean, you could do like a pontoon style. And so one thing that we do during we call it Nature Fest in September, is we book a tour operator from Mount Dora, and they have a pontoon boat that they bring down, and they take our visitors out on a tour. And we actually we narrate the tour. They're just kind of our boat operator. But that is something that could be done.
I'm thinking about the one park boat tour.
Right,
And
absolutely.
And it's been
Yeah.
around for years and years, and I'm sure, and of course, you need tourists.
Right.
It's something to do, I mean, you pass by Gatorland, there's not an empty car in that parking lot ever.
True.
So they're always looking for something to do, so I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Be monetized with like pontoon boat.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting idea that we could explore for sure. Thanks. It's in September. I haven't fully set the date yet, but it's probably the last Saturday of September. So yes, it's called Nature Fest. And that's our big on-site open house event that we do every year. So we've got different nonprofit partners and vendors that kind of do environmental nature related work. So a lot of artists and artisans that work in the environmental or nature fields. And then we've got all kinds of presentations and tours that go on throughout that day. Yes.
Walking tours as well.
That's correct. Yeah, so our Uplands guided hike is a walking tour, and we're doing it, I think, one Saturday a month right now, and it is registered in advance. And our tour guides basically take you around the dry upland areas, and we talk to you about that habitat. And we talk to you about the fire, and we show you everything that kind of goes into restoring and maintaining that habitat. Yeah, so you can find those on our website. There is a tab that says get involved, or not, sorry, a tab that says events, and it's listed on our events calendar for that. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we've got a lot of different educational activities. In addition to the kids and family-oriented activities, we also have a program that we facilitate called the Florida Master Naturalist Program, and that's for adults. So that's where people like you can come in and you can really learn about Florida ecology. So this program is run by the University of Florida's extension offices, and we facilitate some of the courses at the preserve. So currently we're teaching a freshwater course. So these courses are 40 hours of contact learning time, and it's a mix of classroom learning via presentations, but a lot of hands-on field trip where you're getting out into the environment and seeing things with your own eyes as well. So those are really fun. We offer the dry upland course in the fall, and then the freshwater wetland course in the springtime. So you can always be on the lookout for those as well. The class that we're holding right now, just last week, spent the half of the day out on the Lake Apopka North Shore with the Water Management District, really learning about what they're doing out there for the lake restoration. So it's we pull in a lot of great guest speakers and experts, subject matter experts. So what kind of stuff can you see at the preserve? A ton of stuff. So we have a wide variety of plants that are native and natural. There's a few out there still that are not native, but we're slowly getting those removed off of the property. It does take quite a while because you have to, if you don't get to something before it seeds, then you got to go back and get it once the seeds have already set. But we've got these beautiful flowers called swamp hibiscus. It's a native Florida hibiscus that grows in the wetland areas. And then, of course, a wide variety of different plants. And our animal life is pretty amazing, too. We've got gators that nest right alongside the boardwalk. This past summer, the summer camp kids would be going down the boardwalk, and they'd see this big old gator sitting just off to the side. And they're like, what's that gator doing there? We say, we think she's nesting. We think she's got eggs underneath there. And sure enough, it happened just after summer camp ended. So the kids didn't get to see it. But the babies emerged, and it was just amazing to see all those little babies just right there, a few feet from us, but we're up on the boardwalk, so we're safe, you know? We've got these really cool brown water snakes. people have been seeing these guys down by the dock area, so right at the lakefront, for the past month or so. These 2 brown water snakes have just been hanging out, totally visible, even on these cold days. So yeah, it's been really cool seeing those guys. All different kinds of birds. We have a great relationship with the Orange Audubon Society, and they come and do quarterly surveys for us for birds. And they upload that information into a database called eBird. So if you're a birder, you're familiar with eBird. But that's been showing that there's been some really interesting bird activity at the preserve. And then one, of course, that we are very proud of is our gopher tortoises. So gopher tortoises are Florida's only native tortoise, and they dig burrows in the ground, hence the name gopher. They're what we call a keystone species. That means that they are super important for the ecosystem. If you think of an arch, that stone that's right at the middle holds it all together. If you take it away, that keystone, the whole arch collapses. So if you take the gopher tortoises out of the ecosystem, the whole ecosystem can collapse. And that's because a lot of different animals utilize the burrows of the gopher tortoises. There's been documented about 350 species of animals utilizing tortoise burrows. So when we bought the land, I don't know how many tortoises were on the property at that time, but there weren't a ton because it was under active agricultural use. So there probably were a few, but not a ton. And then in 2001, we released 17 gopher tortoises on property from the Florida Fish and Wildlife's relocation program. So basically, if you're going to develop an area, you need to remove those tortoises and put them in a safe location. So we received 17. We have been doing gopher tortoise surveys every couple of years for the past 10 years or so, and we have been seeing our tortoise population at about 180 burrows. So from 17 individuals to 180, 190 burrows. Now, that doesn't mean there's 190 animals because a tortoise can utilize multiple burrows, but there's definitely been an increase in the number of tortoises from 17 to be able to get to 190 burrows. So we are very proud of that. We feel like that is really showcasing that the work that we're putting into this habitat restoration, that they are thriving. We are seeing the hatchlings come out every year. We're seeing the evidence of the hatchling burrows when we do those surveys. So yeah, our last survey was in 2024 and we had 190 burrows. I'm just trying to schedule now our 2026 survey, so I'm kind of excited to see what those numbers end up being. They eat quite a variety of plant matter, so they actually love a lot of things. They will eat a variety of grasses. Some plants called gopher apple are their favorites. Yeah, a lot of different plants. So they are strictly herbivorous.
Will they abandon their dens, or are they always active at some point?
Great question. No, they will. I don't know what the mechanism is for that, but sometimes they will abandon one and move to a new one. And then when that happens, other animals will utilize that then.
So like they don't put like we've relocated sign or anything?
Not quite. Right.
5 acres.
Yeah.
They love my lot.
Okay.
So I have at least, I think about 10 now so far.
Okay.
But, which we don't mind, we're happy about it. Let them roam and free, but they just want to get on the fence line.
I don't know why, but they do seem to love fence lines.
Yes, and like the whole fence starts to collapse and
Oh,
the dogs are out,
no.
the horses are out, but I'm like, I don't know if they're still there or not.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can tell if they're still there because grass is going to start growing around that clear area.
Sand.
Yes, and you'll stop seeing, especially after rains, if you don't see kind of some scooch marks in that sand, you'll know that they've kind of abandoned that burrow. But yeah, lots of different animals will utilize it. We often see that coyotes will end up digging them out to make them into coyote dens, but rabbits will use them, snakes will use them, some birds will even go down into them briefly. There are frogs that live down in them called gopher frogs. There's a mouse that lives down in the burrows called a gopher mouse. And then there's things that live with the gopher tortoises as well, like dung beetles. Somebody's got to eat the dung, right? So there's dung beetles that live down in there with them. So, yeah. So, yeah.
Panthers at all on the property?
No panthers. So we do have coyote and bobcat. Those are our bigger type of predators that do live on the property. There's no breeding populations of panthers that have been documented up this way. There are males that have been documented ranging up here, but the female panthers are still kind of down in the Fort Myers region and south. So, yep. And information on that, I highly recommend watching Path of the Panther. It's on Disney Plus. It's a really cool documentary about how the panthers are trying to extend their range a little bit up north of the Caloosahatchee River down in Fort Myers. Yeah.
Would the wildlife corridor have anything to do with that? I know that's a little bit more prevalent north, I think.
Well, it's actually down south too. So the Florida Wildlife Corridor is kind of a statewide effort to connect the parcels of land that are kind of fragmented. So what they're doing is they're trying to assist landowners, particularly large ranchers or farmers, with putting conservation easements on their land so that we ensure that that land remains open and traversable and accessible to the bigger wildlife, such as the panthers and the black bears. So there's some really cool maps that showcase, if you just look up Florida Wildlife Corridor, that showcase kind of the land that is currently preserved, and then they've got priority lands that they're kind of deemed as they want to get conserved to ensure that there's this path that goes all the way from the Everglades all the way up through North Florida. And unfortunately, we are not considered within the wildlife corridor primary areas that they want. We're like, it's just over in Claremont, but it's not quite this way.
Is it like Boggy Creek area as well?
Yes, I think that's part of it. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So where are we going from here? We have a thriving education program. We are open to the public that people can come and explore. So what do we want to do? We want to continue expanding our education capacity. We can't really expand our education center any more than it already is. But one exciting thing that we do have going on is that the town of Oakland is obtaining a few more acres of land to be added to our property. So there was a farm, private farm on the east side of our property called the Briley Farm, and that is being developed. However, part of that development agreement is that the town got about 11 acres designated as set aside for the conservation areas. So it will be added. I can't get onto that property yet because it hasn't finished the whole process, but I'm hoping that by the end of this year, I'll get to step foot onto that land and really assess what's going on there. But with that, we have about 7 acres of it is going to be more of the wetland areas. So we'll just leave that be, kind of add it to our wetland acreage. But about 4.5 acres is going to be kind of usable dry upland areas. That's the area that if you've been on the Oakland Nature Preserve property, you would walk along our fence line and be able to see zebra, Watusi cattle, emus. That was all from that private farmer, Briley Farms. So we're obtaining that little plot of land that we shared that fence line that we could use to be able to see those animals from. With that, what we would love to do, because it's not going to be purchased with conservation dollars, it's being just donated to us, is that we would like to put in a pole barn style pavilion to be expanded education space. So an open pavilion that we could put picnic tables in. We could expand our classroom space so that we could host bigger groups. We could rotate groups around different areas of the preserve a little bit better. It could be event space. We could host birthday parties out there. We do already host some birthday parties at the preserve at our education center, but we're kind of limited in the space that's there. And then the other thing that we would like to do is to try to have a little bit of space, but it could be kind of flex space. So we could use it for some recreational activities like teaching archery, for example. We used to teach archery at the preserve, but we would teach it on the outside of our property where there was just an open field that was a right-of-way easement kind of area. But the property owners of the property that was adjacent to it fenced it out because they put a school in there. And so once that fence got put in, it wasn't safe to use anymore for archery. So we have not had archery on that property in 4 or 5 years. So we'd love to be able to bring something like that back. A little bit more. A lot of what we do is passive recreation at the preserve, but that would bring a little more activity back into it. So that's kind of some of our goals, to be able to expand our ability at the preserve. And then, of course, managing our land. So our education programs, we end up charging a little bit of money for some of them to be able to provide our staffing and the variety of things that we do. But managing the land doesn't bring in any money. It costs us a lot of money to manage the land. So our goals are to try to find sustainable funding to be able to continue that land management process and to continue that restoration and ensure that it really does grow up to be a true sandhill ecosystem. That might be it. I put some information here about our upcoming events. So this Saturday, hopefully before the really cold weather sets in, is Oakland Heritage Day. So this is put on by the town of Oakland, and we kind of assist them, and we're participants in it. It is from 10 to 2 at Spear Park in the town of Oakland, and there's lots of vendors and live music, and we'll be doing probably not a live animal demonstration because it might be too cold for me to bring my animals out there, but we were planning on doing a live animal demonstration. And then we are holding a raffle during the event as well. And then in March, on March 7th, we have Pours at the Preserve. That is kind of our annual fundraiser. That's kind of like, it's not a full-scale gala, but it's kind of our relaxed, chill kind of gala fundraiser. So that is where you enjoy drinks and heavy hors d'oeuvres at the Education Center, and then we line the boardwalk with luminaries, and you're welcome to walk up and down the boardwalk, go watch the sunset, and then it might be the beginning of firefly season. So it's fun to kind of stay out down at the dock until after sunset and then walk on back. And that brings us to kind of the next thing, is fireflies. A lot of people don't realize that we do have fireflies here in Florida. We just don't see them, especially in our urban areas. The fireflies in the area like to breed in damp soil, so kind of the edges of wetlands. And we've got a nice stretch of wetland area that we don't spray for mosquitoes. That's the other thing, is that when we spray for mosquitoes, we're killing off all of the other life as well. So because we don't spray for mosquitoes and we've got a nice area of wetlands, we do have a lot of fireflies, lightning bugs that breed. Firefly season usually starts mid-March. So I usually go out there at night, kind of mid-March, just to see, hey, are they popping out yet? And then we will put out to the public, we're going to be open on certain nights from March through April to allow you guys to come in and see the fireflies. It is a little bit of a fundraiser for us in that we ask for donations, but it is not a ticketed type of event. But it's really fun for people to come out and explore. And then that's it. That's what I've got. So what other questions do you guys have? Thank you. Yes?
What types of endangered plants do you have on this property?
So we don't have any that are naturally occurring endangered. However, we do have some of our volunteers who are board members that also volunteer for the Florida Native Plant Society, and they go out and they're doing rescues of plants that are on areas that are being developed. But I don't think we have any endangered plants on the property. We have some that are considered rare, but the endangered plants in Florida are mostly going to be on what we call the Lake Wales Ridge. So that is the higher area of ground that wasn't really ever covered with water way back in the day when Florida was mostly covered with water. Those areas were more like islandy type of areas. And so it was just this called Lake Wales Ridge that runs from Lake Wales down south up to Claremont. So we're just kind of on the east side of that area. And so we don't really have any naturally occurring rare plants, endangered plants here. But we have planted a few. I just don't know the species of them. Yeah.
Where does your funding come from? Like, I'm a little unclear on that.
Yeah, so because we've got a great, because the town owns the land and we've got a great relationship with the town does budget some for us. So a portion of our budget, currently about 40% of our budget comes from the town. And then we get various grants from different organizations. We do have program fees for some of our educational programs like summer camps and field trips and whatnot. And then the rest of it, which is probably 20%, comes from individual donations and sponsorships. Yep, absolutely. Anything else, my friends?
Just wanted to let you know with your grandchildren, we're going walking.
Good. I love to hear that. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, if you haven't been, come explore. And if you have, come back.
How do you get more information on the kayaking end of things? Is that?
Yeah, so it's all on our website. So on our website, there's a tab that says Learn, and it's going to have then Blue Hikes. So if you look at that Learn tab or the Events tab, that's really going to give you a lot of information about the goings-on at the preserve. Yeah.
Nicole, thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Doc.
We're good.